Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, China is in the news again. Evergrande, their once largest property developer that was saddled with about 300 billion in liabilities. Well, a Hong Kong court has ordered its liquidation after creditors failed to reach a deal. So potentially, theoretically, this could be about the largest liquidation we've ever seen with over 300 billion, over a quarter of a trillion in liabilities. Real estate's become a major drag on growth in the Chinese economy. It's posting one of its weakest rates of growth with official numbers for decades, as real estate has tumbled officially down about 9.6% last year. Real estate's been a real growth driver for that economy in the past. And we're also seeing this having fallout to local governments that used taxes and land sales to these developers to really pay for a lot of their expenses. So, really big potential fallout here. Um, and I wanted to just get your thoughts on what we're seeing in the Chinese real estate property sector.
Well, look, I think there's a lot of unknowns with this. I think truly the fallout probably started really 2 years ago when they stopped paying. All those creditors felt that pain immediately, especially when you're talking about $300 billion in liabilities. And you would assume to some degree that that's probably just bank credit. But even though maybe it's not really driven down here, I think that there's probably a lot of smaller businesses that were owed money to as well. And that probably, that'll spread far and wide, especially when we're talking about, China's largest developer. I think the other side of that as well is, this shows what could potentially happen if you allow government to put their heavy hand into the way that a business operates and, finances everything.
Yeah, I mean, not this is a complicated story, not to make it too simple, but I'll go ahead and make it too simple. After '08, a lot of those export markets really slowed down after the Great Recession, which was a
Yeah.
global event, and China kind of decided they were going to bridge that gap by just pouring a ton of money into real estate. It had been a problem before, but then it really became a source of malinvestment, just building projects that had no utility, building apartments that nobody was ever going to live in. And I think the problem is those export markets never came back. So it was supposed to be a bridge, but kind of to borrow a poor metaphor, it did become a bridge to nowhere. I mean, you never got back to developing those export models. And so you didn't bridge to future growth. The future growth isn't there. And now you've got all this bad debt. And one of the problems, too, you've got with this Hong Kong ruling is if the Chinese government allows this to go forward, you're going to have price discovery. You're going to find out just how much these markets have really fallen if you put this up to open bidding, and you could see massive price declines of resetting the market. So it's not clear that they're going to even let this go forward. It's not clear that they have a solution, that they have a clue what they're doing for real estate or for the economy at large. And in a totalitarian one-party system, this isn't good for stability. So, we shouldn't see this
Well,
necessarily. Yeah.
maybe it is. I mean, maybe it actually brings fundamentally the value back to where it should be, right? That's kind of one of the things that 08, '09 did in the United States. You're talking about China and China's real estate and then their export products. One of the largest things that Florida had at that time was what was called Chinese drywall, where it fundamentally, ruined a lot of the real estate because it, put it in and the chemicals related to it would corrode almost everything, electrical, plumbing, everything in the house. But I think in reality, what it did is cause things to slow down and really pushed real estate back towards what it should have been priced at, not what it was at that time.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, unfortunately, what China's got going on dwarfs 2008 for the
Oh,
US.
for sure.
And I'm with you. I'm a capitalist. I think the best thing you could do is let the market decide, let market forces work this out, have actual price discovery. I mean, and start directing your resources not to, you know, building trains and bridges and cities that are never used, but actual productive assets. And then that
Or
brings up
or
another
or
problem
or,
too.
or artificially bolster the value of your currency.
Yeah. Well, and here's another issue they have too is maintenance. You build all this stuff and you get that kick in GDP growth. But then you have to maintain it, and it starts becoming a drag on growth, and they're there. I mean, this is, this economy is going to be really interesting because this is really not a real estate story like you and I talk about in the US or in other markets where it's an actual functioning market and you're buying property to generate income or buying property to live in it. I mean, they literally were building property that nobody was going to live in and was never generating income. So this is kind of its own beast. Uh, but it does have global ramifications and ramifications for the Chinese economy and just as real estate investors. It's kind of interesting watching the probably the largest real estate investment bubble in all of history pop. Hopefully, it doesn't get too ugly.
Well, I think you actually hit something that was really interesting there. It triggered in my mind is that you're talking about a bridge to nowhere and building cities that were really the bridge. There wasn't even a bridge to nowhere. It's just a city that's an island that nobody was ever going to go to. And you saddled a company with $300 billion in liabilities to build it. Well, I mean, what was the expectation? You know, it
Well, like
was
I
it
said, I
was
think the
apparently
original,
doomed to fail, and the company
yeah,
didn't ever really consider that.
no, and I really do think originally the expectation was they'd use this to ride out until those export markets came back, consumer spending came back, like it was pre-08. But it never came back. Americans never came back to, I'm going to take out a house loan and buy an extra boat. That spending you had pre-08, it never came back. It's not going to come back. China has to figure out what it's going to do, and it doesn't have a plan. Uh, I guess we'll keep watching this. Appreciate your input. And hey, if you enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up, click subscribe, and feel free to throw some comments in. Thanks a lot,
Thanks,
Jeff.
Steve.